Every spring, you carry the most powerful rooting hormone in science to the curb inside a bundle of pruned willow. Then you drive to the garden center and pay £12 for a synthetic copy of the exact same compound, in a plastic bottle with a barcode. In 1910, a Cornell botanist documented 8 techniques that made every one of those purchases unnecessary. His name was Liberty Hyde Bailey. His manuals were the most complete practical guides to the kitchen garden ever assembled in the English language. Then the chemical industry arrived and his books stopped being reprinted. Not because the methods failed, because they could not be sold. These are the 8 techniques the garden center replaced. The last one fed entire civilizations for 1,000 years. Liberty Hyde Bailey did not look like a revolutionary. He was a botanist at Cornell University, precise and methodical, the kind of man who documented everything in dense encyclopedias that ran to thousands of pages. His Manual of Gardening, published in 1910, was the most complete practical guide to the kitchen garden ever assembled in the English language. It contained things that no modern gardening guide mentions: bone burial around fruit trees, willow water rooting baths for cuttings, nettle tea brewed in a bucket, glass jar cloches set over seedlings in March, fish scraps buried beneath corn, leaf mold layered into soil to build structure over years. The 3 sisters planted in mounds the way indigenous farmers had planted them for centuries. Bailey understood these methods because he had studied them in the field, not a laboratory. He corresponded with farmers. He walked kitchen gardens. He cataloged what worked across hundreds of homesteads. His encyclopedias were the institutional memory of a gardening tradition that stretched back before the chemical era. One letter survives in the Cornell archive from a market gardener in upstate New York, written to Bailey in 1912. The man described soaking willow branches in a crock of rainwater and using the water on his rose cuttings. He had learned it from his father. He wanted to know if Bailey had documented it. Bailey had page 341 of the manual. The man wrote back, "I am glad it is written down somewhere. I was afraid it would die with me." It nearly did. By the 1940s, synthetic fertilizers and rooting compounds had entered the market with the force of an industry that had retooled from wartime munitions production and needed new customers. Bailey's encyclopedias were not banned. They were simply no longer reprinted. University curricula shifted toward the new chemistry. Extension agents were trained on product lines rather than techniques. The garden center, stocked with branded inputs and color-printed labels, replaced the almanac and the county bulletin. Bailey died in 1954. His books went out of print within a generation. The techniques survived in the gardens of people who had learned from parents who had learned from parents, passed in conversation, not publication, in the margins of old notebooks, in the habit of soaking a branch before anyone could explain why it worked. The knowledge did not die. It was simply made invisible, like the willow branch soaking in a bucket that could replace every bottle of rooting hormone on the shelf. Picture a kitchen garden in early spring, before the garden centers have opened. The beds are already planted. On the windowsill, jars of cloudy water hold willow branches alongside hardwood cuttings that will be in the ground before the commercial growing season begins. No powder, no packet. The water has gone slightly yellow from the compounds leaching out of the bark. It smells faintly of creek water and green wood. Outside, the first bed has been dressed with leaf mold. The pile that sat in the corner all winter, dark and crumbling, worked into the top few inches of soil. The bed beside it was dressed with purchased compost from a bag. They look the same now. They will not look the same in August. In the far bed, the soil has been mounded in 3 distinct hills. Corn is already an inch above the surface. Beside each hill, bean seedlings curl upward. Across the base, squash leaves are spreading wide and flat, sealing the moisture in. No irrigation system, no grow lights, no fleece tunnel. Every input came from the garden itself. The proof is quiet. The results are not. The shift did not happen overnight. It happened in catalog pages and university syllabuses, one season at a time. By the 1960s, synthetic products had entered the market backed by an industry whose factories had originally been built to produce wartime explosives. Buying was rational, making was inefficient. The garden center replaced the almanac. By the turn of the century, 4 corporations had consolidated control over more than 60% of global agrochemical sales. You cannot patent a willow tree. You cannot build a subscription revenue stream from autumn leaves. And you cannot sell a shelf full of bottles to a gardener who knows that a nettle in a bucket does the same job. The techniques did not disappear because they stopped working. They disappeared because they stopped generating revenue. And the gardener who never learned them kept spending every season on products that solve problems the garden had already solved for free. Here is what they replaced. The first hack is the one that exposes the entire system. It is willow water. Young willow branches contain two compounds in measurable concentrations. The first is indole-butyric acid, IBA, one of the most potent rooting hormones in plant science. Commercial rooting powders contain a synthetic version of this exact molecule. The second is salicylic acid, the same compound aspirin is derived from, which activates the plant's systemic resistance against fungal and bacterial infection at the moment a cutting is most vulnerable. Cut young willow branches from this season's new growth, flexible green shoots, not old wood. Chop into short lengths and submerge in a bucket of water for 24 hours. Remove the willow, retain the water. Soak the base of cuttings in this water for several hours before planting, or water them in after potting. Use within 48 hours, the compounds degrade quickly. Any willow species works. Crack willow and weeping willow have the highest documented IBA concentrations. Within 48 hours of soaking a cutting in willow water, root initiation begins at the nodes, the same nodes that would have sat dormant if the cutting had been planted without treatment. Within 1 week, visible root primordia emerge at points that remained entirely inactive in untreated cuttings placed side by side in the same potting mix. Within 3 weeks, the root system is branching. The mechanism is identical to synthetic rooting hormone. It is simply free and already growing at the end of most gardens. A home grower in Shropshire began using willow water after reading about it in a pre-war manual he found in a charity shop for 50 pence. He had been buying commercial rooting powder for 11 years at £12 a year. First season with willow water, he took 83 cuttings. 79 rooted a 95% success rate, higher than any previous season with the commercial product. Over £130 spent on something his fence-line willow had been producing for free. A retired horticulture teacher in the west of England ran a blind test at a village allotment meeting. 2 sets of identical cuttings, one treated with commercial powder, one soaked overnight in willow water. After 3 weeks, she invited the audience to identify which was which. They could not. The roots were indistinguishable. She has not recommended commercial rooting powder since, and yet the commercial powder is on every garden center shelf. The willow branch is not. A jar, a branch, 24 hours. That is the entire cost. Willow water replaces what you buy in a bottle, but the next hack replaces what you buy in a bag, and most gardeners throw it away every October without knowing what they are losing. The second hack is leaf mold. Collect fallen leaves in autumn oak, beech, and hornbeam breakdown best and pile them in a wire cage or bag with holes. Dampen. Leave 12 to 18 months. The result is not a fertilizer. It is a dark, crumbling, fungal-rich material that transforms soil structure, water retention, and microbial diversity in ways peat-based media cannot replicate. In trials comparing leaf mold to commercial peat compost, water holding capacity in leaf mold amended beds measured up to 30% higher after a single season. Work it into beds before planting or use as mulch. Every autumn, every street in every town is carpeted with this material, and every autumn, most of it is bagged and sent to landfill. Meanwhile, the garden center sells peat compost, a product ripped from bogs that took thousands of years to form to solve the exact problem that the leaves on your front path would have solved for nothing. 1 pile, 1 year. The soil does not forget what you gave it. Leaf mold builds the soil from above. The next hack builds it from below, and it has been feeding fruit trees since before fertilizer existed. The third hack is bone burial. Before bags of phosphorus fertilizer existed, gardeners buried ground bones beneath fruit trees, roses, and root vegetables. Bone releases phosphorus and calcium directly into the root zone over months. Phosphorus drives root development, flowering, and fruit, set the nutrients that determine how heavily a plant produces, not just how vigorously it grows. Dig 6 to 8 inches deep at the drip line of a fruit tree or rose, place a handful of bone meal at the base, cover. Apply once per season in late autumn when the roots are still active below ground after aerial growth has stopped. The phosphorus enters the soil slowly, feeding the tree through winter and into spring, the exact window when root establishment matters most. 1 handful, once a year, the tree does the rest. Bone feeds the roots from below. But the fourth hack feeds them from something even cheaper, something you probably binned last Friday, and it produces results visible within 2 weeks. The fourth hack is fish head burial. For heavy feeders, corn, squash, tomatoes, bury fish scraps or fish heads in the planting hole before transplanting. Fish decomposes rapidly. releasing nitrogen, phosphorus, and trace minerals directly into the root zone during establishment. Bury at least 12 inches down to avoid attracting animals. One fish head per planting hole is sufficient, more is not better, and excess nitrogen in a confined hole can burn young roots. This is not a modern invention. It is documented in Native American agricultural practice and pre-industrial European kitchen garden manuals for the same reason. It is one of the most nutrient-dense, free amendments available. The Tis Quantum account, a Patuxet man teaching Plymouth colonists to bury fish beneath corn, has been recorded since the 1620s. The chemistry explains why. A single fish head contains roughly 7% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, and a spectrum of calcium, potassium, and trace minerals that synthetic fertilizer blends attempt to replicate in a bag. A first-year grower in Bristol buried fish scraps under transplanted courgettes on one half of her bed, 12 inches down, covered firmly. She was nervous about the smell. There was none above the surface. By midsummer, the fish-buried plants were larger, flowering earlier, and producing fruit a full 2 weeks ahead of the unfed half. Her neighbor leaned over the fence and asked what fertilizer she had used. She told him it was a fish head from the market, 30 pence. He stood at the fence for a moment. Then he asked for the details. 30 pence, 12 inches deep, 2 weeks ahead. Everything so far feeds the soil, but the fifth hack does not feed anything. It protects. And it has saved more seedlings from late frost than any fleece tunnel ever sold. The fifth hack is the glass cloche microclimate. Place glass jars, bell jars, or cut glass bottles over individual seedlings in early spring. The glass traps daytime heat and releases it slowly at night, creating a microclimate 2 to 4 degrees warmer than surrounding air. That margin is the difference between a seedling surviving a late frost and a seedling lost. Ventilate during warm days by lifting one edge. Trapped heat without airflow causes fungal disease. Remove entirely once frost risk has passed. Any clear glass vessel works. Old jam jars are the most practical size for individual seedlings. A dozen jam jars across a bed cost nothing and extend the growing season by weeks, the same weeks a heated propagator extends it for 30 pounds. No fleece, no heated propagator, a jar and a seedling. The sun does the heating. The cloche protects from cold. The next hack feeds from weeds. And the one after that I need to be honest with you about, because most gardening channels repeat the old advice without checking what has changed. The sixth hack is nettle tea. Fill a bucket 2/3 full of fresh nettle leaves, gloves recommended, and top with water. Cover loosely and leave for 2 to 4 weeks. The nitrogen compounds released during fermentation are in a form roots absorb readily. Dilute 1 part nettle tea to 10 parts water before applying. Use on leafy crops, brassicas, salad greens, chard during active growth. Apply every 2 weeks through the growing season. Young nettles harvested before flowering contain the highest nitrogen concentration harvest in spring before the plant sets seed. The smell dissipates within hours. The growth response is visible within days. The cascade runs the same way through every one of these hacks. Willow water triggers root initiation. The roots expand their surface area. A larger root system supports more foliage drives more photosynthesis, and more photosynthesis feeds more growth. Fish scraps decompose, releasing nitrogen and phosphorus during the critical establishment weeks, and the plant sets fruit earlier and heavier as a result. Nettle leaves ferment in water, nitrogen compounds enter the solution, roots absorb them directly, and within days the difference is visible. None of these needed a factory, none of them needed a patent. A bucket and a nettle, that is the entire cost. Now, I need to be honest about the next one, because it is the only hack on this list where the old advice can actually cause harm if you follow it without checking the science. The seventh hack is the soot deterrent, and I need to be straightforward about this one, because most gardening channels repeat the old advice without mentioning what has changed. Old-time gardeners applied chimney soot around plants as a pest deterrent. The dry, gritty particles, discomforted slugs and snails crossing the surface, documented in pre-war guides, widely practiced until synthetic pellets made it unnecessary. Here is what has changed. Modern chimney soot may contain polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and heavy metals from treated wood, plastic residues, and mixed fuels. These are known carcinogens. Do not apply contemporary chimney soot to a food garden. The safe, modern equivalent is wood ash from clean, untreated wood. Same deterrent effect, known mineral content, zero contamination risk. Wood ash also adds potassium and raises soil pH, a benefit for brassicas and legumes on acid soils. Apply as a dry ring around vulnerable plants. Reapply after rain, as moisture dissolves the barrier. Same principle, safer material. That distinction matters, and it is the kind of thing that separates real information from repetition. 7 hacks. All of them free, all of them proven, but the 8th is different. It is not a technique. It is a complete system, one that fed entire civilizations for 1,000 years and was proven by Cornell University to outperform every modern monoculture ever measured. The numbers are extraordinary. The 8th hack is the 3 sisters. Plant corn, beans, and squash together in a mound. Corn grows tall, providing a living trellis for beans. Beans fix nitrogen from the atmosphere through root bacteria, feeding the corn and squash. Squash spreads wide at the base, shading the soil, suppressing weeds, and retaining moisture. Each plant supports the others. Developed by indigenous farming communities across the Americas over centuries, it is the most documented small-space polyculture system in agricultural history. Dr. Jane Mount Pleasant, a Tuscarora scholar at Cornell, produced the definitive research. Her study found 3 sisters plots yield over 12 million kilocalories per hectare, exceeding any monoculture on the same land area. Together, the 3 crops provide all 9 essential amino acids, a complete diet from one garden bed. Iowa State University research found these polyculture plots produce 28 to 53% more food per unit of land than the same crops grown separately, with 54% less nitrate loss. No fertilizer, no irrigation infrastructure, no purchased inputs beyond seeds which can be saved from every harvest and replanted indefinitely. Plant the corn first, allow it to reach 6 inches, then add the beans and squash so the corn has enough height to support the climbing beans before they need it. A community gardener in Glasgow ran a 3 sisters bed alongside a conventionally planted bed for 2 seasons. No additional fertilizer on either beyond initial soil preparation. She kept records. By the end of the first season, the 3 sisters bed had produced noticeably more food per square foot. By the second season, the gap had widened: more food, less irrigation, visibly better soil structure, looser, darker, more earthworm activity. She now plants a third of the plot in 3 sisters every year and has not purchased a packet of those seeds since the first season. 3 crops, 1 mound, 1,000 years of proof. The techniques Liberty Hyde Bailey documented in 1910 did not stop working when the garden center opened. The willow branch still contains IBA. The nettle still ferments into nitrogen. The fish head still feeds a root zone. The 3 sisters still feeds a family from a single mound. None of that changed. What changed was the economic system built around the gardener, a system that profits when the gardener does not know what the bin, the fence line, and the forest floor already contain. What changed was not the biology. What changed was who profited from it. Every willow branch soaked overnight is a gardener who stopped buying rooting hormone. Every nettle bucket is a household that stopped reaching for the liquid feed. Every 3 sisters mound is a plot that stopped needing the fertilizer aisle. Every leaf pile left to rot through winter is a gardener who stopped buying peat. The garden does not care what replaced these methods. It only knows what works. What would your grandmother grow if the garden center had never opened? Share your thoughts below. We have a video on the 6 soil secrets that ancient farmers used without ever buying a single input. Click on it and we will see you there.